I'm the person who's been here since 1991 as the non-professional comedian. So any laugh I get is bonus. Literally, I've been speaking at this conference twice a year since 1991. If you held me up in an elevator and I only had about 40 seconds, I'd say I'm a mental health, economic development producer and entrepreneur. I've helped start a bunch of companies, done a few movies that you've heard of. Everything I do is social impact. I'm also a lucky hypochondriac, and that's why I'm here right now, because I'm interested in anything to do with one of these days, if I ever get sick and I'm in my 60s, it'll be there to help me. Somehow or other, I'm always pretty good. But I've watched Victor pivot with the trends, pivot with culture, pivot with business on this space, and I have been moderating a panel in this space pretty much since the beginning. Now, I have a little bit of history in the space. It's about 35 years. I was actually put through grad school through Harvard with a little pot money, but let's not go there. I know that nobody's recording this, so they're not going to go back and double check the records. But I started working with a group down in Santa Cruz, which pretty much everybody's in that business, 35 years ago, and it turned out to be Tim Blake from the Emerald Cup. I went to his first Emerald Cup about, I guess, 2003. It was a little party in his living room, about 80 people. Now, does anybody not know what the Emerald Cup is? Any hands? You all know what the Emerald Cup is? 25,000 people, growers, botanists, geneticists, etc. Tim was supposed to be sitting here, and unfortunately, he was not hurt, but he had a car accident. This last 24 hours has been a very strange period for a lot of people. My flight was canceled. Multiple other seats were canceled. I've lost 3 speakers, but fortunately I've gained 3 speakers, although one of them is late, hoping he doesn't have a car accident. So on that note, I'm going to segue a little bit and talk about why I'm personally interested in this space. About 12 years ago, a friend of mine that I met through Tim Blake announced to me that he had 15 days to live. He was going into hospice, stage 4 pancreatic cancer, stage 4 lymphoma, and he was already deep into CBDs as medicine, and he got his doctor at Stanford to do something illegally and without anybody noticing it. He injected a very large dose of CBDs directly into his pancreas. He's going to be arriving here in about 20 minutes. He was literally the FDA's first federally registered pot patient. When I saw him live, and not only live, raise a bunch of money to start his own labs 12 years later, and then I watched him help another person, a woman with cervical cancer, twice surgically removed, and then it came back, and this time they got rid of it with CBDs. When I saw my own wife eradicate her migraines with CBDs, the lucky hypochondriac in me got excited. Modestly so, I don't want my heart to spin up, but I realized that there was a great opportunity, but I was a public figure. Again, I work with the UN. I do a lot of very interesting philanthropic projects across the planet. I couldn't actually get actively involved. I was invited over the years to leave a little extra room in my trunk for a couple pounds here and there so I could make a little money. I always said no. But with our the Farm Bill and the migration, the race to the CBD business as a real solution, I got very involved in with hemp, and a business with 25,000 opportunities in terms of uses, with an opportunity to truly make a difference in the world. I got very involved and immediately began building a global ecology of microecologies that are complementary. On that note, I'm going to talk now specifically about our panel. I came up with this title with great joy and clarity, matching strains to maladies. It made a lot of sense to me, and so last year we did the first strains to malady panel, and multiple of the speakers here were on that panel. And one of the women I invited was a woman I met while having my son take horse riding. Her son was taking horse riding, which was amazing because he had epilepsy. He would average about 100 epileptic attacks. It was either a day or a week, and I don't remember. And his mother happened to be a postdoc researcher at Stanford. Her name was Dr. Catherine Jacobson. I'm not sure who you've heard of her, but it was her that initiated the research that got the first FDA patent on the application of CBDs to epilepsy. The first thing she said to me very softly was, I hate to tell you this, but I think you can't actually talk about matching maladies to strains because CBDs work for everybody. And unlike the medicines that the FDA approve, which has been so facilitated and boundaried and reinforced, and I'm not going to say paid off, by the pharma industry so that it's one drug for one outcome for everybody, CBD is not like that. It's genetic. It relates to all the different body types, the genomics, the aberrations we have. It's a complicated subject. But does that mean that we can't be thinking about how to, number one, raise quality control to the point where we know exactly what we're getting, it's organic, what the soil is, what the processes were, but more importantly, we can't match strains to specific outcomes genetically, much as me in 23 or 23andMe. I'm Slick, by the way, which means I get it right, but I'm thinking backwards, which is hard to contemplate. Anyways, there's no reason why the research that must get done can't get done, and I promise you, 3 months after the large corporates start to buy into this business, it will be legal for research. So the purpose of this panel is to address this topic, share our knowledge. These are experts in the space that have dedicated their lives to it. And without further ado, I'm going to begin. My strategy is always the same. Have everybody introduce themselves because I'll blow way up. Watch what I do with myself. I actually sell women's shoes at Nordstrom's, but I'm good at speaking. I'm going to have them introduce themselves. I've asked each of my speakers to think of 3 to 5 trends that they've observed, and then the conversation begins. And if you don't ask questions, I will make you ask questions. Son, please introduce yourself.
Sure. My name, I guess I have to switch.
I'll do it. My name is, okay, go on.
Is that, can anybody hear? Hello? Yeah. Test, 1, okay. So my name is Sundarajan Mutialu. My nickname is Sin, but now has been changed by Jeff Lowenfels, and hopefully some of you know him as Sun. I'm a Chief Strategy Officer at Azentive. We're a wellness, sustainability, and emerging technologies company. I'm really a technology evangelist and try to find the right kind of more biomimicry technologies to live with, to work with nature. My basic task is to leverage these kinds of technologies for a win-win situation, not only with the people that we serve, but the people that we work with. And so my educational background, basically advanced materials. I'm a plasma physicist, and working with very large corporations, I've decided now to move more into nature and more into biomimicry, and obviously getting through Berkeley, I was also and continue to be a user of this beautiful plant. So I basically enjoyed that as I was doing my education and studies. Aligning with Mother Nature is basically where I'm at now, and we developed a mini sun. We call it the Sun on Demand, to be able to bring in sun indoors, not an LED, none of these kinds of lights, but the full complement of sun. And so we're changing the industry a little bit. I think that's all I've got for right now.
Okay, Tim Blake, who I was talking to you before, couldn't come. Tim is a dear friend of mine of 35 years. One of the things I didn't mention is I'm building a global ecology of associates that I know that share values. Values alignment is very important in this business. Tim, unfortunately, couldn't make it, but he said, I couldn't do you anything better than introduce you to the chief geneticist, the plant whisperer, and the beautiful fellow that I work with, who I know only by voice on the phone. And that is myself, because he thinks that I'm talking about him. Only kidding. Michael. Interesting enough, Michael Backus, Michael Angeletti. Oh, there you are. Sorry, you're next. You were sitting next to Michael Backus, who looks like another Michael Backus, who I know, Michael Bay from the movie industry. That's why my brain slipped for a second. Michael, why don't you introduce yourself next? Because, and then I'm going to go back to you, Michael.
I'm fine, thank you. Excuse me. My name is Michael Angelotti. I'm the product developer in Genesis for Emerald Cup products. I've been a partner with Tim in the company for 9 years, and basically I've kind of taken the mountain approach to the mountain outlaw approach to how we did breeding. So it was, we pop seeds, we look for the phenotypes that are going to express the best in the environment that we're growing them in. So we have to deal with issues of molds, mildews, the temperatures, the heats, all those different things like that. And that was really how I got my breeding, was able to make these strains that would have specific outputs and specific, to make a specific product. And what I was most interested in is doing non-solvent extractions. So we're only using cold water and ice in order to make our products. So everything that we put into our tinctures, everything that we put into our rosins and our products are all extracted using only water. And that's, I think that's a really great thing when it comes down to the medicine, because you're not dealing with any of these kind of harsh chemicals or solvents that are still going to be attached into the cannabinoids and into the DNA of the plant itself when you're using that to make the products. The Emerald Cup is an amazing event that we're going on our 16th year right now, being in Santa Rosa, and just watching the event grow from when I was first attended 9 years ago to, just as David said, in the backyard with maybe a couple hundred people at Tim's house, and now we're at the Sonoma County Fairgrounds with 25,000 people attending. It's just a really an amazing thing, and it's an amazing movement that we have going here with the cannabis and this ability to hear and to actually get rid of all this kind of prohibition and propaganda that has been told towards us about it being bad. It's really amazing to see where we're going right now with this plant.
Here.
I'm so happy to meet you. We interacted on the phone, and it was wonderful working with you. And now, Michael, I'm going to go back to you. Michael, please introduce yourself.
My name is Michael Backus. I've been working in this industry for about 13, 14 years now, and my interests primarily these days are focused on trying to reduce the preponderance of BS that is thrown around with great velocity. The thing that's wild about the cannabis business right now is people are passionately certain about things for which they have no evidence whatsoever. And they're trying to get you to write a check and give it to them based on what's coming out of their mouth rather than what's coming out of their warehouses. And this is real.
Come out of their mouth versus what's coming out of
their warehouses.
Okay.
And so I think we have to get just a lot more realistic. And the reason, if we want to be taken seriously, we have to align our words with our production. And it really is a big deal. For example, you'll hear claims that, and this panel's about those claims, you'll hear claims that specific entourages produced by the cannabis plant are advantageous for particular symptoms and maladies. And the thing is the evidence base is a little thin on that front. I just got back from teaching doctors in Hawaii last night, and I teach doctors around the US, and I stay in touch with a lot of researchers. And the thing is that everything is looking optimistic, but a lot of people are taking that optimism and trying to convert it into proof. And the truth is, in a lot of cases, that proof currently does not exist. And here's a thing that I talked about the last time I was on one of these panels, which is the cannabis industry is operating under a very interesting bias, which is called survivorship bias, which means that the people who claim to be cured by cannabis products, well, those are the people who survived the cannabis treatment. Okay? People who had illnesses that did not respond, and often that is the vast majority, died, and they're not here to say, well, it didn't work for me. And while I love working with patients using cannabis products, I control my mouth because I don't want to promise more than can actually be delivered. There is nothing more terrible than talking to a patient who's using everything in their power and all of their family's resources to try to survive a catastrophic illness, and some person in the cannabis industry is basically blowing smoke up their butts. And that's really unfortunate. It happens way too much. So I hate to be the naysayer here, but actually I want a really, really promising future in this industry, and the plant is capable of providing it, provided that we get a little bit more attached to reality and a little bit less attached to fundraising.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think that that's the greatest filter we've had so far. And the BS is immense. On one hand, everybody's trying to get into this business. On the other hand, I think it's the last major epic till the next one. Who knows when it's going to be. Unlike blockchain, where you had to have money to get in, at least 10 million to 100 million to actually build a reasonable fork. With this business, if you have good soil, a good heart, and you can talk to people, I believe this still is an amazing opportunity for vast numbers of people. Go ahead.
Let me say one thing. Yes, I agree. So here's the deal. You have to understand the difference between craft and commodity ag. If you understand craft ag, and you're willing to put your hands on the plant, all right, and really bring out what the plant's capable of, as opposed to seeing how big a greenhouse you can build in Desert Hot Springs, which is, if you think about it, what a great place to build a greenhouse. But if you can actually get your head around reality, there's an amazing opportunity here to improve this plant. This is an incredibly plastic plant that can be kind of communicated with to do amazing things. But you have to have your hands on the plant. Craft versus commodity.
Yeah, this is, it's an amazing world. All the complaints that the folks have in the business is all these people are coming in from the outside now and don't know what they're doing, and B, they're losing their opportunities. And on this very panel last year, one of the startling realizations I came to was that because of the FDA and because of the corporate momentum and cash, it's going to be a very hard market for anybody to be in, at least on the cultivation side, unless you have access to water, labor, land, and access to distribution, unless, as Michael just said, you have access to the soil and you are an artisan and can develop something and produce something that's different than other people have, and you can prove it out. On that note, I want to introduce you to my next speaker, who I didn't even know existed a day ago, which is shocking because he's actually quietly one of the most active investors in cannabis for more than half a decade. Paul has actually invested in 150 cannabis companies, and he's Canadian, which means he's a good guy and got good values. And we had a great chat, and I really like where he's going, and I'm going to let Paul introduce himself, and I'm very grateful to you for coming. By the way, I'm half Canadian, which means I'm half good.
Hey everybody, thanks for having me here today. It is true, I will cop to it, I am from Canada, but I'm a recent resident, transplant to Los Angeles, so I have the privilege of getting to go back and forth. Toronto is the most powerful city in the cannabis industry globally, there's just no doubt about it. We're often referred to as the wallet of cannabis, and while I certainly appreciate the distinction between craft and commodity, cannabis is an expensive industry. I live at the intersection of finance in this industry, and it is expensive. Some of the largest companies in this industry that I've had the pleasure of being associated with have raised now into the billions of dollars, literally. I can name those companies by names: Kronos Group, Canopy Growth Corporation, Aurora Growth Corporation, or at least Aurora Cannabis. So this is a very expensive industry, but I want to start by the most important part of my resume, which is that I'm a cannabis user and enthusiast and have been for most of my adult life. I didn't bring cannabis products with me today. They just happened to be on my person when I arrived here because I'm, as I said, a near daily user of cannabis. And before I unpack quickly what is my resume in cannabis, I'll say I start as a user, meaning that as a user, I'm evaluating the user experience, which is what I think we're ultimately talking about here. And what I'm evaluating it is, am I going to get a sterile and standardized and predictable response every time? And is there going to be oversight on my supply chain so it's not caveat emptor or buyer beware? As much as I appreciate the good faith intentions of growers that are not subject to regulation and testing, and I'm sure that they're doing their best, I wouldn't put any product in my mouth or on my skin that didn't have some oversight. We go back to like the books that Sinclair Lewis wrote about the food industry, which led to the FDA. I've been to growers all over the world that are just, quite frankly, powdery mildew incubation centers, and this is showing up in product that people are consuming. So I want a better product. And the better product's going to come from the regulated market, and it's going to cost a lot of money, straight up. I want a better product because I look at this as a wellness product. It has improved the wellness of my life immeasurably. I can squish every stigma there is about what a cannabis user looks like, but I'll just quickly tell you my resume. I'm an attorney by training. Don't hold that against me. I had the foresight to leave. But it's a great industry, and I worked in social justice as an attorney in criminal defense and constitutional law. And I've been an independent entrepreneur most of my life. I entered the cannabis industry in 2012, and I started a small company in Canada called PharmaCann Capital Corporation, which 3.5 years later was corporate rebranded to the Kronos Group, which is now I think the third largest cannabis company in the world, the first cannabis company to ever trade on NASDAQ, and received about a $2 billion investment from Altria. This is all about an idea that came out of my basement when I was contemplating what the future could look like in Cannabis 2.0. So I'm certainly a good person to attest to what is possible from a company building side. I've had the great fortune of participating with a number of other really wonderfully run and well-intentioned companies across pretty much all major borders in the United States. That's in the board of Ianthus Capital, which is one of the big MSOs. And I've really had the good fortune of touching a lot of great entrepreneurs, and this is my mission from here on in my career, is to help the great entrepreneurs navigate the myriad potential pitfalls and opportunities that go in front of them. If they're going to grow a business of any size, he or she is going to need capital, and taking on outside capital is a very scary thing for small entrepreneurs. Everything changes when you take on outside capital. There's a whole myriad of challenges that if you're not ready for are going to overwhelm management. So this industry is moving at just warp speed. We have an expression, cannabis years. 1 week in cannabis is like a month in another industry. From where it started when I entered in 2012 to where it is today is absolutely just dynamically, seismically immense beyond anyone's imagination, but the future is even brighter from where we are. So I'm interested in this panel. Everyone that's on this panel comes in with a great pedigree. I'm delighted to be here, and thank you for your attention today.
I come from a law family, so I understand liability as a concept. As a lawyer, I mean, this particular topic must be more stimulating than almost any other.
Well, I have an expression. Another company I founded is called Title Royalty Corporation, trades publicly in Canada. And it's not for nothing that 3 of the senior members of the executive team were lawyers, and myself, our general counsel, and our president. And we had a sort of a neologism, which is how not to break the law while you're breaking the law. And what I mean by that specifically is anyone that aids or abets any participation in the cannabis industry is committing an offense under the Controlled Substances Act, just by being a party to the offense. Lending capital is aiding or encouraging or assisting. But that was not the law we were worried about breaking. I was prepared to wear that potential risk. The laws I was worried about related to the transportation of money across state borders. We could get into mail fraud, we can get into proceeds of crime, and an aggressive attorney general can take the RICO statute and turn it into prosecution just about anything. So there is just a tremendous amount of legal liability, and I would again encourage any entrepreneurs in this space not to discount the way that could be an unexpected headwind that could absolutely torpor their business. So I've been involved in several businesses in several industries. This is as complicated an enterprise as probably I've ever imagined. It takes just a tremendous degree of symphonic skill sets. Talk about the entourage effect. The level of people you need to build this out is just incredible. So that's just one of the myriad of challenges.
So I'm going to go fast, but I am going to tell you one more story because I can't resist. Last September, during the General Assembly at the UN, I produced an SDG award show. How many people here know what the SDGs are? Okay, that's the Sustainable Development Goals. That's the plan that the UN put together to bring peace and prosperity to the world by 2030. You should look up UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals. It's very important. I produced this show, and I had a number of interesting people there. The CEO of Unilever, a Nigerian king. Akon was one of my beneficiaries, Whoopi Goldberg, etc. Akon, the show was from 7 to 9. Akon showed up at 5 minutes to 9. Just in time for his award. The awards almost didn't make it, but fortunately there was one of the guys I was working for turned out to be CIA, not working for, but was helping me. So he showed a badge and the awards made it 3 minutes before. Why do I tell you that story? Because Dr. Roy Dittman arrived perfectly in time for the last poll. I called him up an hour ago and he was in Anaheim. and agreed to come and speak on my panel to replace Cameron Kalouche, who's sorry that he couldn't make it. His father is in the hospital. So Roy and I have not talked in more than a decade and a half, but we've known each other for more than 2 decades, and I'm going to thank Roy for introducing himself now.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Roy Dittman, and I founded the companies Nanospherics and Biophysics back in the late 90s, early 2000s. We were the first ones who innovated kind of drug delivery in a natural way, and also we invented the first spray insulin at the time. At the time, we were looking at nanoparticle delivery systems and nanoparticle stability. What I mean by stability is like when you take a structure of a protein or any kind of substance within, say, a CBD structure, including the oils, the proteins, the carbohydrates. How accurate is that information flow, that communication, from the molecules to our cells? So, for instance, if you take insulin, the FDA allows as much as 40% damage to, say, insulin, right, as an example. Well, what happens when there's that much damage to a protein molecule such as insulin, is that people end up having their legs amputated because of the immunogenic response. Now, the other thing that happens is it just doesn't work. So a lot of the drugs today, unfortunately, especially the biological medicines, don't work properly. Mostly this is because of the freezing process. So when we freeze certain kinds of proteins, for instance, protein-based therapeutics, which are the big money makers, there's tremendous damage to those structures. It's like a lot of people don't aware that when you freeze something, it causes just as much damage as when you heat it up. But it's actually, it's a fact. So what we pioneered was a way to bypass freezing in what's called the glass phase. So it's a glass phase means like very rapidly, it's flash freeze frozen. It's not really an accurate term because it's beyond freezing. So it's in that state of perfect accuracy, you might say. So there's less than 2% damage compared to 40% damage. So at the time, McClellan, who was head of FDA, came and met with our entire team at UT Austin School of Chemical Engineering and College of Pharmacy, and he said, look, this is a major breakthrough. I'm going to require every pharmaceutical company in America to use this process, obviously. The FDA had written a big Bible, this thick, about the problem of spray freeze drying. Big problem in pharmaceutical manufacturing. Does this apply to dietary supplements? You bet. Of course it does. It applies to many things that are being created into powders, for instance. And what does this mean for the average consumer? Well, it means a lot to all of us. For instance, when you look at the structures in nature, the most fragile structures are those which are the most effective and powerful also. This is the way the cellular communication occurs. So if we want to preserve those structures properly, we have to process minimally in a non-toxic way to make sure that the communication of that plant or that protein is accurately now being communicated to our cells and actually also even delivered through the cell membrane in a graceful, non-violent way too. Obviously, there's ways you can force delivery, and there's ways that you can force information. But as we know, with waterboarding and other techniques, they don't really work that well in human example, right? So it's a kind of similar kind of an analogy. We don't want to force anything in nature. Okay. So anyway, so the point being though that this is advancing. Like you were saying previously, I agree that we're moving very fast, very rapidly through this, and it's very exciting. I'm very excited about how these technologies can be applied and moved on into the end product, which is all of us, so that we can help our families, doctors can use this in their clinical practices to the benefit of all of us. Thank you.
Brilliant. I have never said that, actually. I'll say it again. Brilliant. Roy, it's great to see you again. Thank you and Chris to be here. Just for 1 minute, Chris, do you mind standing up? This is the man that is supposed to have been dead about 12 years ago, and he got his doctor to inject CBDs directly into his body, and he's still here. So, Chris, thank you very much for taking your life into your own hands, and the government made him the very first registered, federally registered pot patient. Got it. I've been given the 5 minutes. That's actually not right. I probably have 7 minutes. I'm going to do something radical myself. I'm not going to inject anything to myself, but I'm going to inject something new into the board here. I've asked each of my speakers to put together 3 to 5 trends, but I don't think we have time for that because I also want to do something very importantly. I like to want at least to get 3 questions, so I'm going to start questions early on the questions. What's your question?
If you had one piece of advice for an investor or something that you feel is the best investment trend moving forward, most likely to be successful, what would you say?
You got a grandmother, she's qualified with the SEC, so she can still write a check, but she's naive. What would you tell her?
I mean, my generic advice is to be really careful because I am certain that more money will be lost in cannabis stocks and cannabis companies going forward than is made. And so this is a tricky thing because there's a lot of FOMO where you're hearing about everyone, striking gold on cannabis stocks, but more will fail than will succeed. And I do believe that we're not in a bubble because this is a real economy that will be worth trillions of dollars. But my success has been because I took years building sort of an information pipeline and collecting a lot of data points and being able to really start creating an evaluation metrics using quantitative and qualitative analysis. So I would say the short answer is if you're not an expert and you want to be in the space, the best thing to do is to invest in one of the funds, like one of the ETFs, because then you're going to outsource, you're going to pay a small fee, but you're going to be able to diversify your portfolio with money managers that really understand the space. And while I'm generally anti-fees and I'm more into the index, don't like to pay money managers, this is such a disruptive space and there is great opportunity but great hazard. Just picking 1 or 2 stocks randomly I think is really dangerous and you're gambling, not investing. So my advice is if you don't know the industry, find an expert, invest alongside them.
Great response. Go ahead. One of the 3 what?
In other words, one of the 3 things you asked us to do.
No, we're going to get some trends. I just need 2 more questions from the audience. Go ahead. Yep. That's good feedback. So just 2 more questions and that's where we're going. I just want to make sure, okay, I was told, yes, please. The FDA is, the latest whisper I got is they're going to start shutting down manufacturing and processing across the United States that doesn't meet GMP certification, which is something that the pharma already does. So we're beginning to see the battle brewing already. And again, the FDA is all about one product for one solution. This doesn't work for that, so I can't speak. Does anybody else want to speak to that?
I do, actually, if that's okay. The FDA is holding hearings right now seeking public consultation, but there seems to be a momentum towards having some regulation on CBD, and there's an expectation that there's going to be a sweep of products coming off shelves, and there's going to have to be something, either it's GRAS, generally regarded as safe, something short of FDA approval to give some authentication to the consumer. On the other hand, I think the Farm Bill, the key takeaway from the Farm Bill is it cedes authority to the FDA, which could be a good or bad thing depending on the FDA's mood towards it. So we're in a wait-and-see attitude, and I think just to go back to the development of the industry, that's another scary point, is why CBD is all the rush right now. The FDA is one keystroke away from completely disrupting that economy.
Roy, do you want to say anything since you've been speaking to the head of the FDA? You want to speak to that?
Yes, a little bit. Well, one thing I wanted to do is to acknowledge Christopher Holliger, because he was one of the main pioneers in the nano CBD area. And this is going to make a big difference, I
Yeah.
believe.
Chris,
in
do you want
the
to
CBD space.
say something for 30 seconds?
Yeah, let's see, so Roy and I have worked together for almost 20 years now on nanotech, and so I took that technology, put it into, developing a safe, CBD and other cannabinoids. We use many different cannabinoids from other plant medicines too. And I treated the lead judge for the FDA, which is Richard Sherry of glioblastoma, and cured his cancer. That's the reason why the FDA believes me.
That's great, man. And watch your television screens. You'll be hearing more about Chris's life. So let's do this now. We've got 4 minutes. Let's see if we can push to 5. Everybody takes 1 minute to share your trends, if you can. Starting with Sun. I know you put about an hour into them. Just share some quick trends on matching strains to maladies.
Yeah, very good question. So a little bit disruptive here. Everybody's different in this room. Everybody's CBD receptor is different. You're in a different part of life. You have a different physiology. There are no strains that are going to be perfect for everybody for every malady. You have to find the one that's best for you. But what I will say, though, is the things that are available right now are Me Too products. 80% of what's grown out there are either in greenhouses or in indoor grows. So you're buying poison, mostly. If you're buying outdoor with regenerative farming, then you're buying a medicine. You have to be an advocate for yourself to be able to find the right strains for your... I can talk to you later about specific strains, and I think Mike as well here on the board after, because I know we're tight for time.
So it's all about trust. Go ahead.
It's all about trust. The other is education, and I think you have to think about how to educate yourself and understand that the CBD strain trend that's going on, you need a little THC, otherwise it doesn't open up. You just don't buy CBD and it happening, right? And that, I think, is a problem of the Farm Bill. To be able to do that is just say CBD everywhere and you're fooling the public. You really need to know what you're putting in your body.
Thank you. The key word is trust.
Yep.
You can just mention them, but don't even describe them. Quality with yield and differentiate. Not yield, it's quality. Go back down a little.
Sure.
Okay.
So I'm saying it's quality, not yield,
Yeah.
right? If you're pushing yield all the time, you're not making good medicine.
I'm sorry we only had 45 minutes, by the way. This should have been 2 hours. Michael, you are extremely qualified to opine. What are you observing?
I mean, the truth is that what was just said is actually pretty correct. The chemotypical fingerprint for a lot of the genetics that are currently available for patients, there's not a lot of variation. So you see a lot of clustering around things like high THC, limonene, caryophyllene, myrcene strains being popular. Now you're starting to see things like the Colombian genetics kind of come back in the form of cookies from Oakland. That's a high caryophyllene strain. That's really interesting because you have a combination of a CB1 agonist and a CB2 agonist, which means that for a lot of conditions that are inflammation-based, the combination of caryophyllene and CBD or THC potentially provides another therapeutic pathway. I think it's going to be the big thing probably in late 2020. But right now, the truth is that we still have to characterize these genetics a lot better than they're currently characterized, because most of the labs that are testing these genetics are terrible. And they can't even find what the predominant terpene is in a lot of these varieties. A very famous lab in the state for years said that the predominant terpene in Jack Herrera was myrcene, when in fact it's terpinolene. And matter of fact, it's terpinolene by a mile, but they didn't even test for terpinolene. And so there's still a lot of testing out there in both the United States and Canada that is highly flawed from providing an accurate characterization of what's in the plant. Until that's fixed, we got to be a little careful.
Make your point, and then I'm going to the next Michael. Son, make your point. Make your point.
Well, one of the things that I just want to make sure people understand, we're digging into what the problems are out there. There is solution. The solution is you've got to do regenerative farming, and you have to do that indoors to be able to do that in living soil, and you have to put the plant first. If you put the plant first, you're going to get the quality medicine, you're going to get an investor, everybody's going to make money, but you got to put the plant first. Not all the additives, not the chemicals, none of that.
I'm being pushed. Let me go fast. Let me say again, Michael, your turn.
Okay, I will speak directly to the question and that the woman asked earlier, which is which strains are have certain healing and beneficial effects to everybody. And what we see here in trends is first it was just THC, which one's going to get you the highest, and now it's CBD, and which one is supposed to be like this miracle drug. But we're really looking and we're missing out on the modern cannabinoids, the CBG, CBL, CBC, which are coming from these land-raised varieties from all over the world. If you're looking for a varietal that has high CBG, then you're going to start looking at these European ancestral hemp varieties that you're going to find. If you're looking for something with high in CBC, you're going to start looking at the northern Indian and say Uzbekistan strains, these narrow leaf drug types. And then if you're looking for the CBL, which is going to be an offshoot of the CBC, you're going to still find those in the Afghanis and the Pakistans and the Thai plants.
Final thought on trends that you're observing, Paul?
Yeah, I think the medical market's just completely broken. It needs to be reformed in every way. I mean, as long as we're going into a bud tender to guide us as to our decisions as to what we're taking as medicine, that's just ridiculous. So I just want to say, I view the future of medical as huge, much more significant, material, and important in the world than the recreational market, but I see that we're going to have to get to advanced, targeted formulations with some efficacy and authenticity, and we'll get closer to, I'm not saying that you take this pill for Dravet syndrome, and you take this pill for anxiety, and you take this pill for neuropathy, but we're going to get something closer to you smoke this for that, and you smoke this for that. And I think that we're getting there. We're collecting data sets. The point is that there was sort of a Cold War or chill on collecting data sets, and while I agree that every sort of endocannabinoid system is unique and idiosyncratic, there are some general trends with always exceptions, and as we get more and more data, as more and more users report what's working and what's not working, we can start to at least create some data sets that might reliably correlate why this strain of indica is good for a certain condition. So this is going to get better and better. By better, I mean the patient's going to be more informed and going to be able to take less trial and error and get right to the outcome they're seeking.
Data, IoT will be part of that. Go ahead, Roy.
Well, one thing I would like to add in terms of a current trend that I see happening already is the move towards nanosizing the particles in the CBD cannabinoid fractions. And I got involved personally because Dr. John Hicks, a famous pediatrician, told me one day that he was getting tremendous outcomes with application for babies with glioblastomas, which I found hard to believe at the time. But he was adamant that I should look at his data. I was very impressed, to say the least. That was 5 years ago. I'm author of a book, Brighton Baby, so I'm a perinatal specialist myself for most of my career. And it was very interesting for me. I was shocked to find out this was working so well with infants. So when you nanosize the particles like that, what that means is it goes into the bloodstream just like an injection. So, that's really amazing in how it applies to babies. That's how I got involved personally.
Chris?
So I see that happening more so.
Okay, closing thought. And Chris, come here, please. Your closing thought, son? You got a closing thought? Yeah, come here. Chris, your closing, son, your closing thought?
Oh, no. The other thing I just wanted to answer on the land races, you want to look at Juanita Lagrimosa, Afghani, Oaxacan from Mexico, and Panama Red. Those are land races that you can work with. And if you're going to look at autoflower, Panama Red's a good one to go to because you want to get that 90-day, because everybody's trying to get more production, right? Stay with the land race, do the autoflower, but do it indoors in living soil, and then you can really do production.
Look at epic.blue if you want to see something. That's a company with 200 landrace strains from all across Asia. There is hemp all over the world. There's hemp inside of us. We have CBD in our bodies already. It got stopped 80 years ago for business reasons, and now it's back for business reasons. I want to close with an applause for the man that made all this possible in certain specific ways. Thank you for your bravery. Christopher Holland. No more questions. Thank you so much.